Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood podcast. I'm Joe. With me is Greg, as always. Greg, we had another eventful week of college basketball this week. Shouldn't be surprised by that, but we're getting closer to March. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're getting ready to pick some conference tournaments and whatnot. I think Joe said next week we got some smaller ones we'll have to pick. Not on this podcast, but that really starts to get you in the mood and in the feeling for some daytime basketball coming up. But we can focus in on the here and now because the here and now is still crazy, Joe.
Yeah, we had another crazy week, some upsets, some things you didn't expect, and all we know is that there are the top three teams, UConn, Houston, and Purdue, that everyone seems to think are ahead above the rest, and then there's a bunch of, I wouldn't say mediocrity, but a bunch of teams that are lumped in together from teams number 40 to, or teams number 4 to like 60, I guess you could say. So going to be a lot of fun this March, but let's get started with a recap of last week, Greg, and we also have some topics to discuss as we go through this as well, not just recaps per se, but we'll go through what happened in the last week. We have Virginia and Virginia Tech last Monday. This game was over by halftime. Virginia Tech was up 36 to 16. They win 75 to 41. Virginia Tech fans camped out for this game. Big rivalry game for them, so good for them to get the win. They're still way far off the bubble, so it doesn't really mean anything for them. But they beat a rival. That's cool. And Virginia can't score the basketball. All those years that in the past that they had been criticized for not being able to score when they had like Kyle Guy on the team is ridiculous. They just played slow. This time it's hey, they just can't score. They're not good at offense. The 41 points, 19 or 16 at half. That's pretty awful.
Yeah, and they I believe the average of their last three games is under 45 points a game, a feat that Kentucky almost hit in one game this weekend, a game we'll talk about a little bit later. So, yeah, just not fun to watch on offense. And, they may find a way to sneak into the tournament. They're really not doing themselves any favors the last week or so. They do have the stinker of a win over Wake Forest. It was a 49-47 final score, a game I'm sure anyone that watches probably pulling their eyes out. But this is a team that all you can stand on is they might make a team uncomfortable. There's not a lot to love about them other than they just maybe change the game dynamic with how they play.
Yeah, it's we're going to talk more about Virginia here in a bit due to someone's surprise upset pick last week. But so I'll leave it at that. But yes, they are a team that you don't want to play if you're a college basketball team because of how they can change the pace of the game because of their defense. But you can't pick them. Like if you're picking a tournament bracket, like picking them unless you're a fan of Virginia, I just don't see anyone could sit there and say pick them. And I personally think they're sliding down towards the bubble, Greg. And if I'm on the committee, they're supposed to be unbiased, but like you can't put Virginia in the tournament like if they get close. Like it's just so bad at basketball. It's setting us back 50 years. So all right, let's go to another game on Monday this past week, Greg. We have Houston beating Iowa State 73 to 65. Now, Iowa State started off this game very, very slow. Otherwise, this was a pretty even matchup throughout. I would say this was the Jamal Shed game, 26 points, 6 assists, and 3 steals in this one. Just too much for Iowa State, being that Houston was at home. This will give Houston the lead in the Big 12. They're the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament right now. Iowa State's still doing fine for themselves. They're going to be getting one of those first-round buys that they are so coveted in the Big 12. Although I guess I haven't really looked into how it works this year with the new teams. I have to look into that for next week. But, Greg, any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this game was a dogfight. I watched this one start to finish. Joe already mentioned it. Iowa State kind of started out a little slow and ultimately trying to climb back against, a top 5 defense in the country in Houston. It's just, it's like being down 4 is like being down 8, and being down 8 is like being down 16. It's just everything is compounded. Getting an open shot in this game, it was like pulling teeth. There were very few very nice open looks, and it wasn't bad offense, it wasn't putrid offense, bad, it wasn't any of that. It was just good, solid, physical ball pressure and good defensive rotations and whatnot. So yeah, this was a good game. It did start off a little slow, it was a little tough to watch, but that both teams, the offense picked up in the second half and the defense stayed at the caliber it was. So it made for a very good second half. There was definitely a lot more points scored in the second half, but the defense was just still as good. But the shot making, definitely, it was a lot better in the second half, despite the good defense. So good win for Houston at home. I still think this Iowa State team is for real. It's one of those teams that we maybe weren't sure what to think about early in the season, and they had a nice little record compiled, but I mean, they looked like they belong. That's one of the things I've kind of said this year, Joe, is like, I always ask myself, does this team like look like they belong on the floor with the other team they're playing? And these teams, they look like they're, I definitely think Houston is a tier above, but at least hey, these teams belong on the same court together, not like hey, we're not talking Virginia, get them out of here kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that at all. This is actually good defense. Their guys can make shots. You do wonder in a March Madness setting how far do you want to pick these teams to go because the offense can be limited and because Houston has depth issues. Another player goes down with an injury, so they're going to have, or I guess Ramon Walker, I should say, is the player who went down with the injury. So they're going to have depth issues. It just makes you wonder about it, but both these teams are very good regular season college basketball teams. And again, like we mentioned last week, that doesn't always mean you're going to go far in the tournament, but they have a chance to. And we'll have to see how we're going to make our bracket picks here later on. Let's go to Tuesday, Greg. We have Arkansas beating Texas A&M. Not much to add on this one other than Arkansas is a very talented team. They haven't put it together. There are plenty of internet rumors to show you why, from anything you can imagine on that front, but also, Musselman wanting out of Arkansas is partially part of the thing. He's not the best regular season coach anyway, but this was just a bad year, and they gets the win here over Texas A&M. Who's now at this rate was 15-11. Now, spoiler, they did lose to Tennessee. We'll talk about that game later on this week. So they're 15-12 now, and it looks like that team has some chemistry issues. We've mentioned last week, Greg. It's just Henry Coleman doesn't play anymore as much. Like he's coming off the bench. He's a senior. He's been there forever and started off the year hot. And it just seems like they're jumbling things together. Wade Taylor, even hot and cold, and Tyrese Radford hot and cold as well. Just never can get on the same page. It's disappointing, but they are out unless they probably win all their games up until like the SEC semifinals or something like that.
Yeah, especially since Joe already mentioned a game we're not going to talk about. They got obliterated. I was out of town this weekend. They got destroyed by Tennessee. I did sit down and watch that game and eventually turned it off. So this isn't worth my time. I turned on. I think UConn was in the late stages of that game, but yeah, it's just kind of stinks because there's some exciting players on this team, and it doesn't look like they're going to have it. And they were a pretty trendy pick, I think, early in the preseason and whatnot. Just because of the talent was on the roster, and they are just not putting it together. They just don't have it this year, man, and it stinks because this is a team that I think you and I both, kind of had good vibes about, and they're just the bottom is falling out.
Yeah, there's going to be some discussions about Buzz Williams this offseason too. Just so many years that they get close to the tournament or they have the talent to make the tournament and just can't break through all the time, and that's frustrating for sure. This is a team that, again, just has different players. I'm not sure they all mesh well together. Anderson Garcia steps more into the starting lineup, getting more minutes for Texas A&M. Can't really play with Henry Coleman, even though Garcia is only 6'7". He's actually, and it makes sense, like, Buzz Williams likes guys who rebounds. He had 15 rebounds in this game. He's actually tied with Zach Edey for the most offensive rebounds in college basketball, I believe, at least percentage-wise. So there's things going on that I think just mess with things. Like you bench a guy like Henry Coleman, who's been like a star on your team, who's been a leader on this team, and it's just it makes things weird. It's a weird college basketball age, and it's a tough year for everyone. So when you have those chemistry issues happen, when you have those injuries issues happen, like Texas A&M has had, it makes it tougher. All right, Greg, let's get to talking about some Iowa State and Michigan State here. Michigan State, we kind of thought that they'd have things figured out here at the end part of the season, but Iowa has gotten some wins impressively in a row.
Yeah, I think we've kind of already said, like, we've kind of had that feeling both in the back of our minds, not that, it's anything new or groundbreaking, that we thought somehow, some way, Tom Izzo is going to figure out a way to, get them to sneak into the tournament as, an 8, 9, 10 seed. And I don't know what to do with this team. I mean, losing at home to Iowa, Iowa's not even worth, in my mind, looking at, but this is not a good loss for them. Where do you have them in your most, are they in your like last four, but where are they right now, Michigan State, in your latest bracketology?
That's a good plug, Greg. The last time I did it was a week and a half ago. They were, I believe, a 7 seed. This obviously hurts them because not only since that point have they not really played anyone after that win over Illinois. I believe I did it after that. They beat Penn State and Michigan. That's not going to do much for you. So this loss is going to move them down to the 8 or 9 range. Now they play Ohio State today as we're talking. They're playing. Lose that one, the things get worse. You play at Purdue, you play Northwestern, you play Indiana. Like, this is that question is good because there's some good wins on there. There's Baylor, there's Indiana State, but they lose a couple more games, they're squarely on the boat. All right, so let's move on to another game. We'll catch up with Michigan State later on. They do have that impressive record that we teased. Hey, they're going to be sitting there at 17-10, 18-10, and we'll be talking about them being in the tournament. But still a lot to be figured out with them. We have UConn and Creighton as the next one up. UConn feeling pretty good about themselves after winning last weekend, but Creighton ends up destroying them 85-66. It's kind of in a way that we haven't seen from a UConn team in the past couple years. But UConn hasn't won a conference or hasn't won a road game against a ranked team in almost 10 years. So maybe we should have seen this coming, first of all. But second of all, Greg, just another team that we think could win a national championship just getting blown out.
Yeah, so we saw a couple of teams get tested or these upper echelon teams that we have. And I'll try not to talk too much about teams we're going to talk about later, but we just saw them either lose or go down. It just seems like even our top tier, our A1 best teams, they're vulnerable. I guess that's kind of the theme of the year is vulnerability. And this is when put in context, Joe. I didn't even think about this. I didn't even have this in our outline, but put in the context that Creighton goes and kind of gets drummed by St. John's today makes this result even more interesting. So I just, I still think that you got to be riding UConn, you got to be riding Purdue, and probably, if those are your 1As, your 1B is probably Houston. Joe already mentioned that they have a little bit of depth issues, but I think this is just kind of life on the road. But that stat that Joe mentioned, I had heard that a couple times this week. I think it was 2014. I can't remember what team, but they haven't won a road conference game or a road ranked game since then. It was just like, it was wild to hear because, they won a national championship in 14, and obviously they won a national championship last year. It's just like weird to think a team like that, and just sitting here with a stat that's just one that came out of left field, and like I don't know who put that together and like who realized that, but good on them because that's just not one that I if you would have trivia timed me on that, I would have never in a million years guessed that the team that's won a couple of national titles during that span hadn't won a road ranked game since then.
Yeah, for any fans out there of programs that maybe have aspirations of winning a national title, think about that. Like last year, they didn't beat a ranked team on the road. They had that rough middle of conference play schedule that saw them lose a lot of games. So it's not like it's an end-all, be-all to have all these wins. And even the margin, I think, is concerning, but it's like everyone's losing by this much. So it doesn't really concern me as much as past years. Been telling everyone this year is the year to just fill out your bracket and pick whoever the heck you want to win the tournament and just pick them, or pick mascots. It'll be a lot more fun that way for you guys. But it'll be fun either way because we'll have teams who don't usually win possibly winning in this tournament. So next one up, Greg, we have Baylor and BYU. This was a bad matchup for Baylor. First of all, they're going on the road for this one. Second of all, they don't like playing defense. And third of all, BYU likes shooting threes and making teams really work on the defensive end. BYU wins this one 78-71. Not much is going to come of this when all said and done. I think it'll just marginal Big 12 seeding in the Big 12 tournament, but I don't even know if that matters to me. There's going to be, that tournament's going to be so tough that this win is nice to have for BYU. They were in the top 25 this past week. It's good to be able to stay up there probably, but I don't know. At the end of the day, good win for them.
Yeah, BYU is one of those teams that I feel like I repeat myself every week. It's like they have good net numbers. They're still sitting at 12 in the net, and I just like we've already kind of talked about it. They love shooting threes, so 14 of 36 in this game from behind the 3-point line, and on the opposite side, Baylor goes 5 of 20. That kind of disparity is not going to win you a lot of games. When the other team's hitting their shots, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it, but. I kind of said something last week along the lines of, don't be surprised if you look up in this team. I kind of jumble my words. They're not going to win the national championship. I bet for Joe, I'd bet getting a tattoo on my forehead on that one. But they could get hot and make some noise. All you need to do is string together, a couple of good performances in the row, and all you look up and this team's in the Elite Eight. teams that get hot, I mean, that's what happens. But they also have a tendency to get very, very cold. When you rely on one thing, it leaves you open to both extremes.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that you can win championships with jump shooting teams in the NBA, like the Golden State Warriors. But that's also some of the best 3 point shooters of all time. I'm not even sure BYU, while they do shoot a lot of threes and they're good at it, I'm not sure you can really say that they're like going to change the game or change the college landscape or even be like some of the top shooters in college basketball this year. So it's an interesting team. I definitely recommend watching them for people who haven't, because I'm sure there's still people who haven't watched them. They just once they get in the top 25, they move back out, move back in, move back out. It's not like they're playing a lot of marquee games, but it's definitely a team that could surprise people in March to win a couple games, get hot. Maybe if they could shoot better than other teams in some of these football stadiums they might be playing in down the road, that could be an interesting story.
Yeah, Joe, they have Kansas this week. I didn't put it on our list of picks. I wouldn't be surprised if that game ends up on ESPN Plus, but that's a Tuesday night game. I mean, that's something that might be worth watching your time, worth a game worth your time watching. If there's, I don't think there was a ton else on Tuesday night. But unfortunately, with some of these Big 12 games, they end up on ESPN Plus. I didn't think it was big enough to put in our picks. I try to stick to the best of the best and whatnot, but just something to look out for if you're looking for a game to watch on Tuesday.
Absolutely, could be interesting, especially with some of the Kansas issues the past couple of weeks here. Let's get to the last game from Tuesday, Greg. We have San Diego State and Utah State. Utah State wins this one 68-63. This is huge for Utah State because I think this win probably solidifies being in the tournament. Now, you might say, well, Joe, after this game, they're 22-5. They're probably in the tournament anyway, but some of the net numbers could scare you, or some of the wins could scare you. The strength of schedule can scare you with some of these Mountain West teams. And being 22-5 at this rate, even if they lose the last 4 regular season games and lose the first round of the conference tournament, they're likely in. This almost locks them up. So it's a very big win for them. And San Diego State moves down to second place in the Mountain West. As a result, at the end of this week, we have Utah State and Boise State tied for first. And Utah State beat Boise twice. So it looks like Utah State will probably be the number 1 seed in the Mountain West tournament.
Yeah, Utah State has one loss outside of Q1, and it is a home loss to Nevada, who's 42nd in the net. I don't think that will be a Q1 loss at the end of the day, but no bad losses. Their good wins are Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of meat outside of the conference schedule, but I feel like we said that with a couple other teams, and this was just to repeat a little bit, a team that returned absolutely no one, that scored a basket last year, brand new coach. I mean, good for them. They, happen to be in a conference that we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it a little bit later, but, looks like they're going to get, a handful of bids. So that kind of does work in their favor, that they're winning games in conference, and the conference has to be, on a little better plane than it has been in the past. San Diego State, obviously not what they've been. Went to the national title last year. Lost a couple of guys. They're still a fun team. They're still a good team. I don't know what I do with them is very much going to depend on just what they look like in their bracket. They also have a decent looking resume with no losses outside of Q1. And they did beat St. Mary's and Gonzaga, which any other year might be a decent pair of wins. But at the moment, those two are both on the down. So, I mean, just the Mountain West is just we don't need to spend 8 years on this. We're going to talk about a couple other games a little bit later, just to talk about how it's just a wild crossing of streams out there.
Yep, absolutely. So good for them to get the win. And again, like I said, block up that tournament. It's something no one thought would happen after all the roster turnover they had, but good for them. We'll get moving to Wednesday now, Greg. We have Illinois losing at Penn State. Now, if you turn this one off, you may have thought Illinois was going to win, but Penn State comes back late and get this win. They win 90-89. Now, I forget his name, but Penn State kicked off, I think, one of their best players off the team last week. And still get this win. This was also in their old arena. They scheduled this one especially in their old arena, which is more jam-packed. So good for them for get the win in Mike Rhodes' first year. I think that's really huge for them, building on that for the next couple seasons. For Illinois, just another good team losing on the road. Terrence Shannon played well, 35 points, 11 rebounds, but At a certain point, it's just I can't sit here and say like all these losses are meaningful or not. It's something you don't want to see, and it definitely gives you pause. But when teams like Illinois, Kentucky, and Duke are losing games on the road to teams who are either on the bubble or not even in the picture, then it just makes it crazy. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, 57th right now in adjusted defense on Ken Palm. They definitely don't have as terrible a defense as some of the teams that you and I both liked, but that's not great. Fourth in adjusted offense right now, so that's pretty darn good. It's a road game. I think I'm with you. We might be looking at this a little bit differently if it was a home game. The thing that maybe scares you the most is, like you said, they had the game in hand and kind of fumbled the bag at the end. There's definitely potential to this team. I don't think we're in a stage where we can say, well, they're still working Shannon back into the no, like we're weeks past that at this point. So they're beyond the drama, beyond whatever. There's I don't want to say no excuse, but like because we just saw UConn go on the road and lose to Creighton, but I'd say Creighton is a little bit different of a team than Penn State. So I mean, it gives you pause about this team. They were able to obviously win a couple of games without Shannon on the team, and now they got him back, and he looks like, playing like his All-American self, and they're, still dropping some games that they shouldn't. So you could say that about quite a few teams. I don't know where you have this team in your tiers of like where you want to pick them. I think maybe like Sweet 16 or something like that might be decent for them, but you could say this about just about any team, Joe. Like you wouldn't be surprised if they got picked off before the first weekend is over, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm at that stage with everyone, including the top three teams in the country right now. Where if they got beat in the first round or two, I'd be like, oh, okay, it's crazy, but we've seen this stuff before. Illinois was a team, though, earlier in the season. I was like, this might be a team that could make a Final Four. I think we even said that on the podcast, Greg. Like, hey, watch out, Final Four run. Illinois could be coming back when they were like playing Arizona early on and doing well. So disappointing, but that's just the nature of the sport this year. All right, so let's go. Also, it was Kanye Clary was the player who was kicked off of Penn State. By the way, look that up while you were going on your spiel there. We have the next thing up. We have Dayton and George Mason. George Mason upsets Dayton. Now, Greg, I'm going to be honest with you. I have not watched 1 second of this game. I didn't go back and rewatch it after it happened. So you're going to have to enlighten us on what happened here.
Yeah, they did not. They did not play very well in this game. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this game. Someone I saw started to float the "is Dayton going to make the tournament" conversation. And I kind of like scoffed at that. 20th in the net. This is by far their worst loss. They're 3-3 in Q1, 5-2 in Q2, and no losses outside of that. I just like they'd have to tumble for that to happen. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have a different opinion. I don't really think that it's there. I mean, they got Loyola, which the game that we're going to and we'll pick. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. I guess if they lost at SLU and then came home on the 8th of March and lost at home to VCU, you might be scared to the point where it's like, man, maybe they better win a game or two in the A10 tournament. But I personally don't see that happening. I mean, maybe you think differently though.
No, I think they're almost assuredly in. Like, yeah, if they lose out, then there is a world like, hey, you're 21-10 now in the A10. Maybe you don't make the tournament. Like that's true, but I don't think that's something you need to be worried about right now, especially because they're probably going to be in that 5 to 6 seed range when everything's said and done. I think solidly in if you even if you lose one more, probably 5 or 6 range. But like if you lose 2 or 3, maybe move down closer to the bubble. It's going to take as you said, an absolute tumble for them to be out. I don't really see that happening. I think it's just. Especially conference play, you're 11-3 in the A10 this year. Like, yeah, it's not the greatest conference, but it's the way road teams are doing, or way home teams are doing this year. It's still fine. Dayton's fine. They're going to be fine. They're going to be 5 or 6 seed. They're going to be a tough matchup for this tournament, and it'll be a fun one to watch in that 5-12 game probably. All right, Florida and Alabama. This game goes into overtime. Alabama wins it 98-93. Lots of offense here, as we expect from these two teams. Big win for Alabama. They went to 11-2 in the SEC, which gives them a first place nod in the SEC. Florida, on the other hand, has still had like a great run here the last several weeks. I think Walter Clayton has really stepped into his role. A lot of these transfers, I think we saw it with Stephen Ashworth or Creighton too. transferred in and like starting to find their rhythm, which is just weird that it's happening this late in February, but that's how it goes. Walter Clayton, 27 points, 8 rebounds. For Florida, it's tough to win at Alabama, so credit Florida for playing well, but Alabama gets the win. And again, pretty good for SEC tournament seeding.
Yeah, I want to look a little bit on the Florida side for this one, since you gave us a little bit of a rundown on Alabama. I remember texting you about, I can't remember after what game it was. I said, do we need to start looking at Florida? Are they decent? It might have been, and I'm not trying to rub it in or anything. It might have been after they beat Kentucky that I said, do we need to start looking at this team? Their only loss outside of Q1 is a road game at Ole Miss, which Ole Miss is sitting at 76 in the net. So there's a world where they could absolutely end up with 0 losses outside of Q1. You talked about it. I mean, Clayton's a good player, and he's what they need if they're going to have anything. It's just weird. I was a big Todd Golden guy when he was out at San Francisco, but I did not really think anything of this team until, maybe a couple of weeks ago, especially in an SEC that we expected to be packed. Obviously we expected Arkansas to be better than they have been. We expected Texas A&M to be better than they have been. And even without those teams playing, their best ball, I mean, the SEC there's still some good teams. We've seen some other teams come out of the woodwork and have seasons that they weren't necessarily supposed to have, namely, South Carolina, maybe Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and whatnot. But this Florida team's putting a pretty decent resume together. Where do you have them right now? I'm gonna plug your. I am not gonna plug another bracketologist and say, hey, where's this guy? I'm gonna plug Joe DiTullio, who, according to Bracket Matrix, has had a pretty good run the last couple of years. So if you haven't already checked out Joe's bracketologies, they're pretty accurate. So I'd say it's worth your time.
The plug king is back here for us with Greg, but no, they were, I think the last bracketology they were a 7 or 8, but they're quickly moving their way up. They were on the bubble like 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. So moving their way up, and I'm excited to see. I'm gonna do another bracketology this week, and then I'll do one, next week. I'll do one next week, and then I'll start doing it more on a daily basis the week after that when conference tournament plays for the bigger conferences start. So they're doing great. I think that the key for Florida, Greg, is they shoot well, but they also rebound very well. They're a very good rebounding team. So even if they don't have the greatest defense every game, that's just observational watching. Like, hey, sometimes they give up some baskets they really shouldn't. When you rebound that well and you can shoot that well, they're a threat to maybe go on a little run here. So you're not expecting for us, like we said, probably a team that we kind of thought might be on the bubble all year long, but some other teams took a back seat, so they took advantage. All right, Kentucky and LSU. Kentucky up big second half, 19 points with like 19 minutes remaining, and LSU comes back. Kentucky's defense falls asleep again. End of the game, Kentucky could only get Rob Dillingham to make some shots. He made some incredible shots down the stretch, very highlight-worthy shots. And then they get a shot from Rob Dillingham to take the lead with a couple seconds left, but LSU goes down the court, has a shot that is blocked, and then they throw up an alley-oop, and it goes in at the buzzer for the win, 75-74. Not a good loss for Kentucky. It's a really bad loss, honestly. LSU is 14-12. They have some good wins this season. They did beat South Carolina last week as well, the week before that as well. But it's not good, not something you want to see, especially because LSU wasn't even at full strength either.
Yeah, not their worst loss of the year. Their worst loss of the year right now is the UNCW game, the bye game back in the non-conference. But it's definitely close to that, or not close to that, but it's definitely a bad loss for them. I don't know what it is, Joe, man, but like, I look at this result and like, yeah, we have the benefit of hindsight in the game we're going to talk about in a little bit, but like, I can't quit this team. And I think you already said it on this podcast, when you were talking about Houston, you talk about depth and whatnot, and when you're picking a team to go deep, it's how many options do they have, and it's, of course, it's unpredictable, but like, there's just so many options on this team. Maybe there's too many options on this team, and I can't imagine that. That's a bad problem to have, but it's still something that Cal's got to figure out. That maybe hinders you a little bit here and there. This is definitely a game they should win. Yes, it's a game on the road, and we just talked about Illinois going to Penn State and losing there. So I would imagine these games are probably in the same vein, but probably both Q2 road losses. But I don't know what it is, man. Like, this team could go out and lose their like the rest of the season, and I still would have a tough time picking against them. Is it just that they're fun? I don't know. Why am I having trouble almost objectively looking at this team? I am not a Kentucky fan. You are, but you're also able to split, Joe's very good at splitting his personal feelings from kind of objective observation. So what is it about this team that kind of has me glued to them and to say, like, I don't care. I'm probably this team. They're probably going to be picked in my Final Four unless they bump up against one of my other teams that I'm like, no, I can't pick against them.
I'll save some of my comments for the next game. We're going to talk about them, but I will say I do think that they are, I think they're drawing the nation's love, and I'll say love. It's a love hate thing with Kentucky as always. There's a lot of people who hate them, but they watch this team play and they see the potential, and it's still something that needs to be brought together. It's still freshman led, but like you see Rob Dillingham create his own shot at the end of that LSU game. You see him go on that run, and that's amazing. You see Antonio Reeves averaging 20 points per game, and really should be in more All-American conversations, but like really isn't. You see, even DJ Wagner finishing strong. Like he's not played that well. He's drawn a lot of hate, and then you see all these things come together. Different guys have had their moments, and it's just about putting it all together. And I think part of it too is health. Like some of these losses, they're not full strength, and it's not. It's fair to say they should still win these games, but it's not fair to say they should win all these games, right? So DJ Wagner's out for Tennessee and Florida. Probably not games you're going to win without your starting point guard. I know the other guys are talented, but then you get into the depth question then if you don't have your starting point guard too. And then you have Trey Mitchell out for the last 2 weeks. That's the guy that everyone has said the whole season is the most important player on Kentucky because he's been there, he's done that. You can go small ball 5 with him. That's important too. So there's definitely different elements here that I think are coming together. You have Aaron Bradshaw coming off of a broken foot. You have Zvonimir Ivicic getting the eligibility thing, having food poisoning, and all this stuff going on with him. Ugo Onyenso being injured at the start of the year. It's hard to mesh all that together in one season in this day and age when a lot of skilled teams are out there that can shoot the ball and really make you pay. So there's a lot of things to talk about with Kentucky still. I'm going to save those for when we're going to talk about the next game. But that's what I think it is. I think everyone sees the individual talent. It's just getting them all to play together at the same time and not be hurt at the same time, which is going to be tougher than expected. So, all right, let's go to Thursday, Greg. We have Washington State beating Arizona. Now, I said I thought Washington State would be high on their own supply. It did not happen in this game, Greg. It did happen later on this weekend. They'd made their Arizona road trip, or I guess road trip is not really what they're doing. They're probably flying, but lost. They beat Arizona 77-74, and then they lose to Arizona State, which is a bad loss. Still impressed with Washington State this season. Good win at Arizona. It's tough to do those back in, like the weekend games. You play Thursday at Arizona and also play later at the weekend at Arizona State. It's tough to do that. But I think we're finding more and more that this team is going to be in the tournament. They're going to be maybe a decent seed if they finish somewhat strong. And that even teams like Arizona, which a team that I still like, I just don't know how much, like anything can happen here.
Yeah, there's some interesting stories on this team. I don't think Joe and I have really brought up the specifics, but Miles Rice has a pretty interesting story. It's easy for you guys to look up, but basically he's a freshman in his third year of basketball between a redshirt year and he went through Hodgkin's lymphoma. So there's reasons to cheer for this team, and then there's good players on the team too. This is obviously a good win for them, but Joe, I think we brought them up last week, and you kind of said it might be a rough week, between at Arizona and at Arizona State. You thought they might. I can't remember exactly what you said, but hey, they might bounce back out of the top 25. Well, it seems like they got the win that we didn't think they would, and they lost the game that we thought they'd win. So maybe they'll stay in the back. I would imagine because benefit of the Arizona win, they'll stay in, back in. I don't know if they'll slide back or slide up, but. Yeah, I have to think this is looking like a tournament team, and another team that we probably need to look at and say, okay, what is here now? They have some good wins, obviously. I think we forgot to mention they swept Arizona, so they also won the game at home, but they do have a loss to Santa Clara earlier in the year. They have a couple of Q2 losses littered without including the Arizona State. They lost to Cal, although Cal had a win this weekend against Oregon. So, the Pac-12 seemed to be like any other conference where you can beat anybody or lose to anybody, but, to a lesser degree. I don't know. I'm not saying like I'm going to ride this team into, anything. It's a fun story, but it's hard for me to get on board with this team and say, anything other than, they might win a game, maybe two, if they get the right matchup. But I don't see anything in this team other than, again, the fun story that makes me think like, oh, they're primed or could make a deep run. It's different for like, it's weird because BYU's kind of in this same quadrant, but like there's a realm where I could see like, all right, this is what they have, that if they get hot, they can make a run. I just like, and I'm not saying Washington State can. It's just like there's nothing for me to latch onto here, like like I can with Kentucky, like I can with BYU, and say, yeah, this is what I see pushing them to the end. And maybe some of this is a lot of their games end up on Pac-12 network, so maybe I don't get to see a lot of their games. I can't remember what channel this game was on, but caught a little bit of it, I think. But it's I don't think this is a team to like put on your radar as like, yeah, they're a tournament team, but I mean that's probably about it.
Yeah, I will say, Greg, Kyle Smith, Coach of the Year, needs to be on the short. He may not need to win it, but he needs to be on the short list. So let's add that. But other than that, yes, there's still a lot to be found out about this team, and that's kind of like you alluded to, like the nature of the Pac-12 this year, the being able to be seen on a national scale. There's a lot to be answered for them. Let's move to Saturday, Greg. We have Baylor in Houston. Baylor hosts Houston in this one in their new arena, and they're getting penalized for it because of their terrible camera angle, and they lose this one 82-76. Now, this game started off, Houston takes a big lead, 41-25 at half, and extend it. But Baylor comes back. This is a tribute to Baylor's good offense. Even against a good Houston defense, they're able to battle back, get to overtime. Jamal Shed shoots a shot at the end of regulation that went in and would have won it, but it was a fraction of a second too late. And then in overtime, Houston kind of rolls with it. Impressive, given that, like we talked about, their depth is really going to be tested here in the latter part of the season. Juwan Roberts had a big game, 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 steals. Pretty good for a big guy. He does a lot of the dirty work for Houston. Get that win. Baylor with the tough week with 2 tough games, but I think what we're finding out is Houston's just finding ways to win, and that defense is just tough.
Yeah, it's really good on Houston to have a game where they kind of had it in hand, and then Baylor, just like you talked about with that offense, they claw their way back into the game, and then Houston goes through that emotional, yes, we won the game, and then they go back and they replay the Shed shot, and nope, he didn't get it off in time, so now you gotta go play overtime. That's really good on them. That's a really solid win for Houston. It's a solid win on the road and a solid win just with kind of how the game played out. On the Baylor side, Joe already kind of talked about it. The defense is what's scary. They're 5th in adjusted offense, so their offense is elite. 85th in adjusted defense. So, I mean, yeah, that's very scary. But their offense is so good. You might. I feel like there's a lot of teams like that, Joe, where we just might see some 95 to 90 scores in the first round or second round or whatever. And some of these teams that have terrible defenses they just might get through based on there's not a lot of great. There are some good defenses, and they played one of them here. But it's just going to make for some interesting matchups. 23 from Walter, 23 from Ray J. Dennis, 17 from Jalen Bridges. A little bit of an off game for Misi, but it's not a bad game for Baylor, especially when you're down a bunch, and they did not quit. It was 41-25 at half, and they managed to bring it to overtime. If I'm Scott Drew, I'm going in saying, you got to be coach speak. Obviously there's no moral victories, but hey guys, we were out of this game, and look what we did. That's the message you're taking the guys home with.
Yeah, they're going to give a team they play in the first round a lot to think about. I mean, right now after this week, you might be slotting Baylor in for like a 5-12 game, and that could be like, oh, maybe an upset. But that's a lot for a 12 seed, probably a mid-major, to come in and be like, hey, we got to stop all these different guys on the perimeter and then Misi on the interior. That's tough. So they still have a really good team, and it's just the nature of the Big 12 this year. Greg, let's move on to Duke and Wake Forest. Now, we're going to start with the game, and then we have a couple topics to talk about outside of the game because of the game, but also something I'll add on to that as well. We have Wake Forest winning this one 83-79. Hunter Salas goes off in this one. The Gonzaga transfer, 29 points. There was a point where he wasn't missing. There was also a point where Duke just wasn't guarding him. They just refused to even go anywhere near him, which was kind of funny. But Wake needed that win being on the bubble, so they get that big win over Duke. The fans storm the court. Kyle Filipowski gets injured in the process. Everyone can sit here and debate whether he pushed a student or whether the students ran into him. That part doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What does matter is that players are protected. So, Greg, thoughts on the game first off, and then thoughts on the court storming.
Yeah, Hunter Salas is if I think if there was a couple of transfers we talked about this year, but he might be the most important one to his team. Maybe you could say Dalton Connect, maybe, obviously there's other pieces on this Wake Forest team, but he's having himself a year, almost 19 points a game. So, just kind of like it. I don't know if his growth was stunted at Gonzaga, but just didn't quite have the right fit. And good for him for utilizing what's the options that are out there, coming all the way back across the country to Carolina and having himself a year. The beginning of this game, Boopy Miller couldn't miss. I think he was 3 for his first 3 from 3 or something like that. So you could tell this game was going to be a banger from the beginning. Um, I don't have a ton else to talk about in game. Duke, we do like that we're seeing again. We kind of worried about them in the Kansas vein where it's like who's going to be their options. Well, 17 from Filipowski, 16 from Roach, the 15 from McCain. McCain kind of stepping up and becoming that next option has really helped them. Caleb Foster's had some good games. Mark Mitchell's had some decent games. Proctor coming off the bench in this game. I think he's still kind of reeling a little bit from an injury that he had a couple of weeks ago. So, Duke's a good team, just like any other top 15, top 12 team. They're going to have their flaws, but at least they're putting a little bit more depth together. Now, we can talk about the after game thing, and everybody on Twitter, everyone is the only thing they want to talk about is did he trip him or did he not? And it's just like you're missing the that's not okay. You want to talk about that? All right. If he actually, attempted to hurt someone, all right, that would obviously be not good. Like I'm not gonna say that would be, that it's anything is permissible, but like I look at that and to me it's almost looks like he's bracing himself. I mean, there's a literal mob of people running at him. Is he, then everybody wants to talk about, is he nursing the playing up the injury? Like it doesn't matter. Like Wake Forest did a terrible job of protecting the players in this situation. I did see someone float out an idea like, why did Shire have those guys on the court, for that last play? Like, all right, whatever. I mean, there's got to be a way, like, if we're going to keep doing this, which, is fine. I don't want this to be out of the sport. I think, it's cool, but like, you could clearly see one of the kids that came in shoved him in the back. Like, fans should not have an opportunity to do that, period. Like, there's no realm in which fans should be coming into contact with players. So if we're going to keep doing this, we got to figure out a way to do it and keep the players safe.
Agree with you on that. I think this is a good opportunity this offseason, I think, is to reform what we do with some of these situations. I think there needs to be, for some of these kids who are contacting players, even if it's not, they're not looking, you have to start looking at, hey, maybe you take some action about kicking them out of school or suspending them from the school. Like, I don't want to do that to people, but if they're going to contact players and physically, assault them, the player's probably not going to press charges because it's part of the nature of the beast here. But you have to do something. John Calipari's been talking about this forever, about protecting players, because when you're Kentucky or Duke or North Carolina, you get court stormed a lot. And it's not about they don't want to get court stormed. They just want to keep their players safe. So I think there has been plenty of places that have done it responsibly and have avoided injuries and have gotten the teams out. But not every, like, it's college basketball. It's not like everything is solidified. It's not like we have a commissioner of college basketball like everyone talks about college football, where everything is known and everything is settled and this is how you do things. These are the procedures for this arena or that arena, because arenas are different. So there's going to need to be a lot more change with that. I don't want to get rid of court storming whatsoever. I think probably more so than Greg, more in this regard that, hey, let anyone who wants to storm the court for whatever reason just do it, because it's college, it's fun. This is part of what makes the sport great. We're not like these disassociated fans of like a pro team here where it's like, oh, these games don't matter. This game matters to Wake Forest. They beat Duke. It's a rival for them. They should be able to go celebrate this win. So there's gonna be a lot more procedural talk, and there should be something they should do to keep the team safe. Now, Greg, so of this talk about storming the court. Wake Forest's big win. This win matters because they now go to a point where they are in the tournament, and they were not definitely in the tournament before that. So this week, the big news: college basketball. The two big topics are storming the court and expanding the NCAA tournament, because that is a talk by some of the people who are in charge of maybe the Big Ten and SEC and all these things. And ESPN decided to run with that. And, guys like Jay Williams, because we're in a debate culture, says, let's expand the tournament. That'd be great, having more teams in. And, I get it from the stance of, there's going to be good players and good teams, from last year, or even got people we thought, like Texas A&M and Miami not being in the tournament. But if you do that, the regular season has already been diminished. Stuff like this will start to lessen in its mattering. This, Wake Forest would already be pretty far in. LSU would be on the bubble. So, that LSU Kentucky game would mean something. But, that, at what point are we going to draw the line here and say this is not good for the sport? Now, this is similar to college football. I won't take up too much more time on this, but we're doing this in college football. We're going from, 2 to 4 to 12 to now even going to 14 before a official 12-team playoff has even come up. They're already debating whether we should go to 14 teams. What you're doing is giving people an excuse to miss the regular season. These games don't matter, for college football especially, but for college basketball too, where it's just going to be, 11, 12 Big Ten teams get in, 12 SEC teams get in the tournament. So I'm very against it, but I figured we could use this as an opportunity to talk about it, because this is what you'd be missing. This game would not matter. And that's what bothers me the most, is I like when my sports that I love matter every single game. And that's something that's being taken away from the sport possibly. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of points, and I want to make sure I point out. There was a couple of years ago. We don't need to spend a ton of time talking about college football, but I told Joe he was dumb, and Joe was for was keep the BCS, and I was like, nah, this and that. We don't need to get into the ins and outs, and I have really come around to okay, I see the big ticket in college football is every week is a playoff. You lose one game, you might be done. And, I guess some people get disgruntled about that and say, it shouldn't be that way. Fine, whatever. And that kind of plays into someone, I think, a game day. And I know it was game day that I was watching. I can't remember who said what, but somebody said, it's an access issue. And I think it was Billis that rebutted that and said, this is a national title, event. This is not if you win your conference tournament, you get in. This is, everyone has access. Now, of course, there's at large bids are going to go to, in general, power conference teams and whatnot. But I did see them put up, if we went to 96, who would be on the bubble right now, and it made me want to vomit, thinking about those teams in national, in the NCAA tournament. Somebody made a point well, people said when we went from 32 to 64 that it was a mistake, and look where we are. This is different. This is very different. If you want to go with the Mark Titus thought, the bracket fits on one sheet of paper. Let's keep it that way. Let's it's nice, it's neat, but in all seriousness, if you look at who we would be letting in, at the 96 or whatever the number would be, it's not. We don't need to go there. You could maybe talk me into, adding another couple of teams into the first, I guess it wouldn't be the first four anymore, but kind of that kind of thing. But Joe, I still think we've kind of talked about, the bigger debate is, or not the bigger debate, but do the 16 seeds, they get that first win, but they, so they get the tournament money or whatever. So if the 16 on 16 playing game, but should they automatically be into the first round? I'd rather be talking about that than this, because for me, I don't think it's necessary. And it worries me that we go here and we ruin the product that we have, and it's awesome. Mm-hmm. And it just worries me. I know these things may not seem connected, but it worries me that we end up in a conversation of, all right, well, now let's take the Power 5 and the Power 6 and let them have their own tournament. I don't know why I'm connecting those ideas. Maybe it's just because that's also been a topic, not as hot the last couple of years, but that to me, I don't want to say I'd be done with college basketball, but man, it would break my heart. It just would, because it would just make the sport not what it is. So maybe that's where I'm relating the things is going to 96, it does change the dynamic of the sport. You're going to have the possibility of, a team under 500 of their overall record getting in. And that's just weird. I'm not it's 68 is fine. Some people say we should go back to 64. Like, okay, you know, you can start talking to me about maybe adding another couple of teams into the first four, but like I am full. I don't care if you say, well, it worked when we went from 32 to 64 or whatever. You can't get me started on 96. I can't buy it.
And this is what's happening with everything here. We have the decision makers opting for these things because they make more money in the short term, right? But like you might lose interest in the sport long term because the regular season games won't matter as much. You can get less TV contracts for that. And we're having those people make the decisions, but then we have them getting the casual fans who don't really pay attention on board with them because they think, oh yeah, more is good, more basketball, yeah, that's great. Or in college football's case, more college football is good. In what place has anything ever had like more of something is worth makes it worth more? In anything. That's something I don't understand as we lose Greg. Hopefully we get him back here in a second. But in what world has anything had where we have one thing where you have more of it mean that it's better? Like in the economy, if you print more money, it's bad. It makes the scarcity of something makes it more unique. And I think we're gonna lose that. And I really do. I think there's a lot of people who are diehard college basketball, college football fans who understand that and want to keep the sanctity of the game, knowing that we're going to have everyone have a chance to be in a lot of these playoffs. But at what point do you draw the line? One and two, it just doesn't seem like it's a proposal made for fans. Like, sure, there's people who are fans of teams like, per se in college football, like Penn State, like they've never been to a playoff, right? And they've been very close. Oh yeah, we want a playoff so we can be in. Does that change anything? Probably not in the end game. Like it's that's how it's going to be. So I'm very against it. I very much hate it. I will accept it and watch college sports forever. But what you're doing is cutting into making things matter in the regular season on both fronts, and also possibly getting casual fans who already don't watch enough of the sport to watch less, and getting diehards to watch less as well when it's all said and done. So long-winded way to say screw expansion. If you expand it, you're gonna have a lot of people upset, and we'll be two of the people who are upset as well. All right, let's go to more recaps here before we get to our picks here. We have Air Force beating New Mexico. Now, Air Force is not very good, so New Mexico is going to take a big hit. I have not done an updated bracketology since this game, but it's conceivable that they're going to be out of some brackets in the next couple of weeks here. With that, Greg, we also have New Mexico and Colorado State. That game went on earlier this week that you're going to talk about, and we also have UNLV beating Colorado State on Saturday. So it's not inconceivable that how Colorado State moves down closer to the bubble as well.
This is just wild. So that is a Q4 loss. The Air Force game. That's at home. That's bad. That's really bad. I don't have words for that one, man. Like, they pick up the win earlier in the week against Colorado State, and like that's good. That's great. We like to see that, but I mean, this kind of loss is like, I mean that puts them in danger territory, man. I'm with you. That's we don't like to see this. I mean, it just stinks because there's teams that you can lose to in the Mountain West and be fine, and this is not one of them, especially at home. Like I forget all. You know what? That doesn't even play into the conversation. At home or on the road, this is not one of the teams that you lose to. I mean, it's a stinger. They already have a bad loss to UNLV, but UNLV has picked off a couple of teams, so there's maybe that's maybe at least explainable. This is not a loss that you can have, and it stinks because this team is exciting. We already talked about them last week. They got one of the most impactful freshmen. Wasn't really on anybody's radar, and they got Jamal Mashburn's kid, and they got Jalen Howe. There's a lot to like about this team. I think they'll be a really exciting March team, but they are trending that Texas A&M way where it's like they have some pieces, but they're definitely gonna need that. I don't know where. So right now, you think? Did you say you think they're out right now? Some people, at least some people's brackets.
I think they might be out of some people's brackets. I do think they're fading towards the bubble. They're not quite on the bad side of the bubble yet.
So here's their only bright side. They have at Boise State coming up. That's Saturday, and we're not picking that game because I think it's big for New Mexico, but in the grand scheme of the college landscape, I didn't think it was big enough for us to put on our radar. They have a home game against Fresno State. You got to win that one. I don't care if they lose at Boise State and then they have at Utah State. You could maybe get away with losing both of those games if they do decent enough in the Mountain West tournament. I would highly advise them to pick off either Boise State or Utah State on the road. I think that kind of thing would definitely help their case. Not to state the obvious, but I think it might. They might need one of those two, and they cannot lose to Fresno State. I mean, it's a little scary right now for a team that I would like to see in the tournament. And I know they're sitting at 26 in the net, so it's weird, but I'm still a little worried for them.
As you should be. I think 3 Mountain West teams probably have a pretty good lock on things. We talked about Utah State probably being in. Boise State, with their quad 1 wins, likely going to be in, and a net of 33. We have San Diego State playing tough out of conference is going to help them. They're probably going to be in when it's all said and done, especially after the selection show had them in the top 16. After that, there's still some debate. Like we were talking all hyped up last week, maybe about a 6-bid Mountain West, and this week it comes back down to earth. And it's a shame, Greg, because these teams do play tough games. Whereas, we talk about like ACC teams. There's a chance they get just as many, if not more, than ACC teams in. Like Duke has won 2 games against tournament teams in the last 2 months. They've lost 2 games too, but they've played 4, and these Mountain West teams are playing tournament teams. They're playing each other and likely going to have more games against tournament teams, and that matters to the committee. But if you lose games to Air Force, it just doesn't matter. So for Mountain West's sake, hopefully they avoid some of those bad losses down the stretch. And as you mentioned, there were some other results there that factored into it too. It's going to be a wild last couple weeks here for the Mountain West, and then the Mountain West tournament as well. It's going to be a lot of desperate teams trying to fight their way in, and God knows some of the teams will be knocked out just because of how tight the bubble might be. All right, we'll move on to Alabama and Kentucky. Wow, Greg, this was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Not kidding. I think this is the most that Kentucky has scored against a ranked team in their history. They win 117-95. Defense was actually okay. They kind of, when you score that many points, you're going to give up more points. They took their foot off the gas at the end. This was the Justin Edwards game. He did not miss a shot from the floor. 28 points. He missed 1 free throw. That was it. A lot of good vibes going his way because he was a player who got a lot of hate on social media from fans. A lot of hate from reporters. As much as guys like Goodman might say that, everyone just hates Cal. No, there was a lot of pressure on Justin Edwards after being such a good recruit. Goes out and has this game, and they win 117-95. Now, defense didn't really take too much of a hit. They're to 76th on KenPom for defensive efficiency. Just a wonderful performance. I have nothing else to say about this one specifically. Just great. I don't know. It was so fun to watch.
I just remember somebody saying that we might see a little more defense in this game because of some adjustments that have been made. I don't remember who said that last week, but I thought taking the over was a good idea, and then just because of someone's comments, I did not take it in this game. So, guess college basketball is still somewhat predictable, but yeah, I mean, good for Justin Edwards because, I feel like he's, again, and this is a team full of, elite players. I feel like he's been almost an afterthought, hasn't had that many games to shoot 100% from the floor. I mean, you really that's words. I don't really have words for that. Team shoots, over 50% from 3, 41 of 65 from the field in general. Here it is. This is what you're looking at. This is the gold standard. Like Joe said, this is the potential. Because when they're on, and I mean, they got basically, nothing from a couple of guys that, have been big contributors in the past. So this is it, man. This is why this team is so hard to quit, at least for me, is because this is what they can be. Although this looks a little bit more like an NBA game, but, that's also because there's a lot of NBA players on the floor.
Yeah, what I mentioned earlier, I was going to say for later is I don't know if I've been as in on Kentucky as I have been all season. I am more in now than ever, and that's from a fan perspective, going back and forth with these bad losses. So yes, they lose to LSU. They hit a big shot at the end. They hit a clutch shot at the end of the game. That's something they haven't been doing, and they should have won after the block shot. Just that's a freak thing. But they played 18 minutes of bad basketball over the last 2 weeks, and even against Gonzaga, they played pretty well right down the stretch. And they had some injuries. DJ Wagner still coming back from the ankle. Trey Mitchell was out. The last 3 out of 4 games have been so good, and they've won in so many different ways. The offense this one, the defense before. Yes, I messed up the over-under because God knows they were playing more defense before, but they're playing really good basketball. They are showing they're figuring it out. They're shortening the rotation. It is everything you want to see, and you start thinking about it. They've risen up already in the last. They're one of the best defensive teams in the month of February. Like especially think about the last 4 games they've played. Moved all the way up from like 135 all the way up to like 70, settling in at 76 now. Because of the Alabama's offense, you're going to take some hits there too. But they're going to go in and they can move this thing all the way to the top 50 by the time the tournament starts, and they can be a very good defensive team. Like I mentioned, it's just going to take time. It's going to take time to mesh these parts together. You have one returning player who did a lot of stuff last year in Antonio Reeves. You have Adu Thiero and Ugo Onyenso, who are mostly bench guys who played bench minutes last year. You have Trey Mitchell transferring in. You have all these young American players. You have a guy from international waters coming in, and it's a whole thing. So I'm in. The defense is showing out. The offense is figuring it out. All these players have had key moments. If they come together and all play well in one game and are healthy, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure there's a better team in the country. I'm saying that with knowledge about how good Houston is and how much respect I have for Houston, with UConn and everything they've done, and with Purdue and what they've done as well. So I am back in. I think they will have to beat Mississippi State this week, and then they set up possibly a big matchup with Tennessee at the end of the year. But extremely proud of how they played. And I do think they're figuring things out.
Yeah, Joe, I was just curious. I was looking, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got a couple other things to talk about, but you had mentioned you thought they were a pretty good defensive team in February. So I pulled up Torvik, and they are sitting, if you just do February's games, it looks like they're top. Yeah, believe they're top 50. So I don't use Torvik a ton, but Torvik's one of the ones you can pretty easily sort by month. So it does look like that defense has been picked up a little bit.
I think in the last 2 weeks they might even be way higher than that. They're up to top 20 in Ken Palm overall as well, top 20 in the net. So a couple of their wins did move into quad one. They have 5 quad one wins now. Like we were thinking going into the weekend, like maybe a 5-4 seed was the best they could hope for. They could get a 3 seed now, especially with how other teams are losing. They could play their way into a 3 seed and be a real factor in this tournament. And that's just something we didn't think. And even after the LSU loss, but we start seeing some of these teams lose on the road. Kentucky is not the only team losing some of these games. I think they just get more of the publicity from it because they are Kentucky, and that's what comes with the territory. All right, let's go to UCF picking off Texas Tech. Now, I had mentioned I like Texas Tech in the Big 12, but UCF is not a good team, but they're picking off some of these Big 12 teams, and I think that's impressive, Greg.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the reasons that this wasn't like the biggest game on the radar, but UCF's already picked off Kansas, and now they pick off Texas Tech at home. So UCF, welcome to the Big 12. Definitely, kind of making their presence known at least. Maybe you think, UCF basketball is kind of an afterthought. They're going to be a bottom 12. They're in the Big 12, but they're at least saying, hey, we can. I can't remember what the phrase you use is. They can mess up somebody's whatever. They have that kind of potential this year, and maybe we'll look at them in the next couple of years. Maybe as their recruiting gets better now that they're in the Big 12, maybe they'll be just a team worth following. So this Texas Tech team, taking a fresh look at the resume, still their only loss outside of Q1 is at home against Cincinnati. So they really have no bad losses. They have some decent wins. I completely forgot that, like 2 weeks ago, they throttled Kansas, but that was without McCullough. So it's going to look fine on the resume, but, just a little interesting note there. They've beaten BYU. They've beaten Oklahoma, TCU, Texas. So again, most of their big wins, if not all of them, are Big 12 related. They haven't lost anything outside of Q2. I don't know, man. I mean, like, this is just a team I have trouble getting on board with. I know they have some good pieces. 37th in the net. They're I would have to imagine that even with a net at of 37, they're still they got to be in the field at the moment. Even with this loss, you know, I just don't know how far I'm going to take this team. When I got to pick it, it's weird because they're battle tested, they're Big 12 tested, but I still am going to have trouble picking them to do anything more than maybe like win their first round game.
That's fair. Well, let's see how the matchups go. I mean, Texas Tech, I still really like. Personally, I just think they're a tough team, but not the result you want going into March here in a couple of days. So, Greg, let's get to the last game. We'll recap here. Now,
no, we don't have to. We don't have to talk about this game. We should go on to the picks.
North Carolina did beat Virginia 54-44. Now, Greg, after I think you would have changed your pick after seeing Virginia Monday.
I actually, if you go on Twitter, I tweeted something to our Twitter account from the show tweeted something, and I tweeted at Joe that I wanted to go back and change my pick. But as I've done this year, Joe, I'm a man on my word. Once it's picked, it's picked. So I had to stick with it and just hope that they had some magic, but there was nothing here. Nothing.
That's, I mean, not more to talk. 16 points in the first half again. That's hard to do. 2 halves in a row. I think, might have to get the old rec league basketball team we had together, see if we can score 16 points against some of these teams, because that's pretty bad. But to your credit, you were going to make a change. I think if you make a disclaimer, you can't change it on our picks that we're doing a competition in, but if you make a disclaimer on Twitter, at least you can say, hey, I picked this at the start of the week. We got new information, and I have learned that Virginia stinks. And
yeah, I just feel like that's a slippery slope to now. Now are my picks going to be live throughout the week? No, you know what?
All right.
Unless coach is dismissed from the program, I feel like I just got to stick with whatever I get. I can't just be buying and selling options throughout the week and then going with what is best in the moment kind of thing. We gotta pick what we pick, and that's where we stick.
Okay, intentionally tried to rhyme that. I see. Now, Greg, there are things that happen that pop up that change what you do. You mentioned some of my gambling quirks last week. Just to recap what's happened on Sunday. We're recording Sunday. Had I known Rick Pitino was wearing a white suit, I would have gambled on this game. I would have bet on St. John's. St. John's ended up beating Creighton. It's not something we're going to recap, but just to kind of go over things real quickly. Purdue's going to win, so that's not really going to matter. South Florida beat SMU. That's huge for the AAC. And then Memphis beat FAU. One of the games we thought a month ago would be a good game, and really now screws up FAU's chances possibly of being in the tournament if they keep on losing like this. So that's going to bring us to our picks for this week. Greg, the first one we're going to do is Monday, Baylor and TCU. This one's at TCU.
Joe, you did miss one thing from today's recap, and that is that Xavier is currently up 8-6 on Marquette. So we can at least say at one point they were winning that game. That's what I'm going to hang my hat on.
Stop the count. Stop the count.
Baylor at TCU. I just picked this game. So TCU's coming off of having a nice win against UC. It doesn't look like UC was ever in that game. So, Baylor, obviously, we've talked about, that they, of course, had a little bit of an emotional game against Houston and had to go up against that defense. I don't know. There's not a lot early in the week, so this game just kind of interests me. I will take Baylor on the road, but I would not be surprised if TCU won this game.
Baylor for me, rivalry game, but I'm going to go Baylor on the road. I think much better team, and I've commandeered Texas Tech and Oklahoma as a mid-tier Big 12 teams I like. I have not done so with TCU as much as I like Jamie Dixon, so I'm going to go Baylor in this one. Next one up, we have Auburn and Tennessee. This one's on Wednesday. A little bit interesting of a game here with the Bruce Pearl revenge game, which we've seen so many times before, with the way Auburn plays, which is a team that's usually very good offensive efficiency, and then Tennessee, where they have one guy in Dalton Connect who's just killing it.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Tennessee, but, just kind of, I don't want to repeat anything you just said, but I think this game is going to be a close game, and again, you already mentioned it, the Bruce Pearl revenge tour kind of thing. So this is one of the games that I'm glad it's on a weekday. So we're not going to be a ton else that we have to focus on because I'm probably going to be glued to the TV for this one.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I'm going to the FC Cincinnati soccer game for the CONCACAF Champions League on Wednesday, but a good game, and I will be rewatching. I'm gonna go Tennessee. I think Tennessee might be, as much as that pains me to say it, the team that me and you both were like together on, thinking they could be a very good team, more so than any other team possibly we've talked about. And I think they do have that potential. I do think they win against Auburn. I'm still like Auburn's a team I like a lot, but like they're one of these teams. We talk about the Big 12 teams and Washington State that we can't figure out. They're a team that is tough to figure out this year too, in the way that sometimes they have guys play well, sometimes the guys don't play well. They win games they should, lose games they shouldn't. It's just one of those things you have to figure out. But I'm gonna go Tennessee because they're at home. All right, Friday, March 1st. Greg, you're going to be at this game. It is Dayton at Loyola. A lot is at stake for the A10. Loyola is 12-2 in the A10. Dayton is 11-3.
Yeah, when I first bought tickets to this game, I kind of didn't think it was going to be that big a game, but it turns out that Loyola is having a pretty darn good season. So we'll be going to Chicago for this game. I of course, am going to pick Dayton. And I think my wife would kill me if I didn't. But you know, I am really excited for this game. I thought we would just hey, we get to go see. It's not very often you get to go see one of your teams play on the road, and here we are. It's really a 3-team race for the A10 title. We got Loyola at 12-2, like you already said. Richmond is still in that mix at 12-2, and Dayton at 11-3. It's going to be interesting to see if there's a world where we do see 2 bids out of the A10. I can't imagine any scenario in my mind where we get 3. It's going to be, if anything, Dayton and one of those other 2 teams. I cannot foresee any way that the records would, or the games would break, that we'd get 3, unless something catastrophic happened outside of there. But this game has some pretty big implications, so I'll take Dayton.
Well, say hi to Sister Jean for us, Greg. Let her know to subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube. That'd be really huge if we can get her endorsement. Let's go Dayton in this one. I think it is. They do have a little bit of like, hey, they're a team who could be good teams, so there could be a little bit of Sleepy Jim thing going on here, where the A10s, there's a lot of Sleepy Jims, but not with Loyola. I think they'll be ready to play against them. They're going to be a big game, and Duron Holmes will have a very big game. Let's go with Saturday games now, Greg. We have Kansas and Baylor at 1 p.m. This is going to be a very good game to watch. Baylor will fall in the rankings this week, but with Kansas's issues, with injuries to Kevin McCullar, and with Baylor having that offense, could be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to take Baylor at home this game. Like Joe already mentioned, McCullar is in question, and we've just seen top-ranked teams lose road games. That's probably the only. If this game was at Kansas, I'd be picking Kansas, and we not too long ago solved that game at Kansas, and Kansas won it. But I'll take Baylor in this game just because it's at Baylor with the terrible camera angle.
I'll go Kansas. I think this is a game where McCullar might come back. This is technically March. This will be March 2nd on the Saturday, so it's kind of fun. Do you need to start getting him back in the lineup and getting used to things? It seems like it's like something he needs to be comfortable with. It's not like a huge injury, so I think he's going to come back. I think I'm going to pick him because of that. I don't want to pick Baylor twice in a week. Personally, even though with 2 tough games on their schedule, I think they might lose one, and Kansas is the one I think they might be more likely to lose. Next one up, we have Tennessee at Alabama. This one will have a lot to say about the SEC, Greg.
I'm going to pick Bama at home in this one. I just think that Tennessee is going to come off a scrappy game against Auburn. I think that's going to take a lot of wind out of their sails. I think they win the game at Auburn at home. I think they go on the road and Bama has another pretty decent offensive performance. That's a lot to ask for Tennessee to win at home against Auburn and then go on the road to Bama within a couple of days. So just looking at what their week looks like, I'll take Bama.
When Tennessee struggles, they play physical teams that can kind of beat you up. So Mississippi State, they lost on the road there. They lost at home to South Carolina. They lost at Texas A&M, they're very physical still. They're not good, but they're very physical. That's their conference losses so far. Alabama's just not that. They can win this game, but I'm going to take Tennessee. I think if there's no one guarding Dalton Connect, he's going to go off, and I think their offense will be able to get rolling, and Tennessee's defense will show up. So I'm going to go Tennessee on the road there. And then, Greg, important to the podcast here, we do have the WCC tournament bet this year. Gonzaga at St. Mary's. Not the season I think either of us thought these teams would be having preseason, or even after a couple weeks when we thought St. Mary's was at death's doorstep, basically. Who are you going with?
I'm going to stay true. And again, like you said, not the context we thought we'd be picking this game, but I'm going to pick St. Mary's. They already picked off Gonzaga at home, away, like at Gonzaga. So I'm going to say that they're going to go ahead and pick off Gonzaga at St. Mary's. I believe they have one of the two longest winning streaks going on. So this team we kind of went off of, and I just kept saying, holding my head in my hands, saying, Joe, I can't believe I said stuff about this team. And now all of a sudden, they're sitting at 15th in the net. I mean, I have to imagine, regardless of this outcome, they're a tournament team, right?
Yeah, they're in the tournament for sure. What seed they might get will be at play, but this is a tough week for Gonzaga. They have at San Francisco, who currently is the third best team in the WCC, and then they have at St. Mary's, so the two road games there. This is the last week of conference play for WCC. We're going to be picking this tournament next week, see if we stick with their picks or change things up. But I'm going to go Gonzaga. I think they did find something in beating Kentucky on the road. Now, Kentucky has their issues. We talked about that. But beating a team like Kentucky shows me you can beat anyone, which is something they hadn't shown. They didn't have quad one wins before that game. I think they're going to be more focused this game. They've shown that they're decently healthy, which is something we've said all year long. I think they get the job done against St. Mary's. It's going to be one of those things where the game won't matter to St. Mary's as long as they take care of business in their first game of the week. They'll already have the league locked up. I'll take Gonzaga in this one. All right, Greg, any final thoughts before we hop off here?
Just ready to go on a road trip and get to see a meaningful basketball game in another city. I think it's going to be a great time.
Absolutely should be excited to hear what you say about the arena for sure. A reminder that next week we will be back to recap this week to pick, probably in a lightning round form of question, the smaller conference tournaments like the WCC, which will start sooner rather than later. Also to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast, Apple or Spotify, wherever you get them, and also on the YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. Thanks, guys.